Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Improve Inventory Control with Soft Reservation in Inventory Visibility Service. My name is Tim, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting the session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be made available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. If you have questions for our presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session and in a live segment after the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Jiacheng Xia, Software Engineer, Yufei Huang, Senior Product Manager, and Hiren Naik, Senior Solution Architect. Jiacheng, over to you.
Thank you, Tim, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Jiacheng, Software Engineer from Microsoft, and welcome to another session for Inventory Visibility Tech Talk series. Today, our topic will be focusing on the soft reservation feature inside Inventory Visibility Service. As we do in previous sessions, joining me today would be our Product Manager, Yufei, and our Senior Solution Architect here, Naik. In our last Tech Talk sessions, we firstly discuss how to scale and harmonize your business inventory data with inventory visibility. We then introduced the process of exploring the data from Dynamic 365 supply chain management by connecting them to inventory visibility, as well as using inventory visibility to handle updates from multiple sources, treating it as the single source of truth of the inventory data. And today we go one step forward to handle the potential overselling and double booking issue inside inventory visibility service with the feature of soft reservation. We'll begin with the scenarios and challenges of potential overselling and double booking issue, and resolve these issues one by one by introducing soft reservation as well as offset features correspondingly. And then we'll be introducing the upcoming feature inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management to allow our users to make soft reservation directly from sales orders inside Dynamic 365 SCM. And lastly, we will go for Q&A sessions. Now let's firstly invite our product manager, Yufei, to introduce the needs for API call to handle the potential overselling issue. Yufei, over to you.
Thank you, Jiacheng. Let's see how a common challenge for businesses like for retailers or distributors can face. And Company Contoso Entertainment USA sells a speaker in two channels. One is via direct sale from Dynamic 365 SCM, and the other is via retail stores. Both channels look to fulfill the orders from the same sets of warehouses. And how to prevent the overselling, and how to make sure both systems are checking to a single source of truth for product availability validation. And as usual, we'd like to introduce Inventory Visibility Microservice to bridge your omni-channel and cross-system inventory fluctuations. In the last Tech Talk session, handling inventory updates from multiple data sources, you already know that once you set up the calculated measure correctly in inventory visibility, you can obtain a more accurate inventory snapshot than any other individual system in your landscape. For example, initial on hand is 100, as recorded in Dynamics 365 SCM, as stated in data source F&O here, and 50 pieces being sold from the point of sales system. As it is common for the POS system to sync orders to ERP system, just only a few times a day. And while before the successful syncing, the data in Dynamics SCM is actually not updated yet. So still 100. And the data can be posted to inventory visibility, which will reflect the correct number for the reference. Then another order asking for 60 quantities will also post data to inventory visibility. And despite inventory visibility will still reflect the correct inventory levels, but the normal inventory update in IV, so the API mentioned in the last session, the post-on-hand change API, actually allow the negative quantity and negative calculation. So it won't really block this posting. So of course, if your business allows oversell, then this post-on-hand API is already enough for you to use. But if you want a hard block when there's not enough quantity left, soft reservation API is the one to look at. And here is how you can use inventory visibility as a single source of truth of available inventory for order promising via real-time omni-channel soft reservation capability. We have three systems here. On the upper right corner, you have Dynamics 365 SCM as ERP, and then an external system on the upper left corner, which can be, let's say, your point of sale system or your e-commerce engine or any other third-party order engine as well. And this, and then you have inventory visibility microservice in between. And to represent the example on the previous deck, let's say the initial on-hand here is 100 stocks. And this information will be synchronized into inventory visibility as usual. And when a customer placed a sales order, ordering for 50 quantities through a mobile app to a point of sales system, then a soft reservation request can be posted immediately to inventory visibility, which makes instant calculation and updating the available for reservation quantity to 50 within inventory visibility. And upon a successful soft reservation, inventory visibility will also respond with a soft reservation ID for the caller system to populate back to the original order line. And this will make later, when the orders are being synced into the ERP system with the soft reservation ID altogether, it will make the offset process back to IV much more convenient. And the customer then syncs soft reservation ID together with successfully reserved order into Dynamics 365 SCM for logistics processing if needed. And as the order sync can take some time to complete, during which time the on-hand available in SCM will still show as 100. And therefore, when the second order that requires 60 quantity comes in, it's best to query inventory visibility again to do soft reservation. And this time, unlike the previous on-hand change posting API, this time the soft reservation will respond with not enough stock, and we would avoid the overpromising of the orders. So basically for the original caller system, if when you make the soft reservation posting to IV and when you receive a response saying not enough stock, soft reservation failed, then you can consider adding some mechanism in your original order system saying that if soft reservation is unsuccessful, even if there is shows as stock, enough stock in your order system, then still do not proceed with the orders. That might be something to consider. And you might also ask, what if my company also create direct sales orders in Dynamics 365 SCM to obtain the most accurate inventory levels throughout the day? Shouldn't Dynamics 365 SCM orders also seek to reserve in IV first? And here, to make the flow more complete, we will offer out-of-box soft reservation calls to inventory visibility service from Dynamics 365 SCM sales orders from the upcoming 10.033 onwards. And in this session later, Jiacheng will also cover this new feature in details. Eventually, you may want to replicate and store all your transactions in Dynamic 365 SCM, and when your orders have proceeded to hard reservation, such as reserve physical or even further status beyond hard reservation, then the offset soft reservation will be triggered from Dynamics SCM to inventory visibility. And to sum it up, as long as your organization operates your outbound orders across several systems or channels, and you'd like to have a very strict control over your own hand stock and absolutely avoid overselling, and it is suitable to consider inventory visibility soft reservation here. And I will now hand back to Jiacheng, who will lead you through a deep dive. Over to you, Jiacheng.
Thank you, Yufei, for your introduction as well as the divisions. Now let's take a deeper look at the process to prevent overselling by soft reservation step by step. We consider the example introduced just now. What we want actually is to use a sort of API calls to do the two things at the same time. Firstly, we want to check that there is actually enough quantity we can promise. And secondly, execute the actual change similar to an on-hand change event. When we think about it, it is not trivial for our users to build such an integration by themselves. Firstly, there is a lot of extra work to do. And secondly, there is concern about in between the query takes place and the actual change takes place, there could be some unexpected change in the interval. To this end, we decide to provide the two operations as a back-to-back API call in one API call so that we will ensure the quantity check as well as the change is validated. We begin with the example of selling 50 pieces out of 100. Before we actually update the 50 pieces to sold, we do a validation and conclude that there are only 50 pieces proposed to sell, where there is 100 available. So we pass the validation and execute the change. However, when it comes to second order, where we try to sell 60 pieces out of the only 50 available, there should be fewer quantities there in the available pool than what we actually propose to sell. So we would fail the validation and reject the inventory changes. In this way, we prevent the second sale and thereby preventing the overselling issue. After all, what we want in this example is that we always check the available quantity calculated inside inventory visibility service and make sure that at any point it will not turn to a negative quantity. We call this API a soft reservation, and we'll introduce the details soon. To begin with, let us see how we can configure inventory visibility service for soft reservation usages, covering the above example. There are two important concepts or measures for a soft reservation configuration. Firstly, we have the reserve modifier. It is a physical measure logging the quantities being reserved. For a soft reserve request coming into inventory visibility service, we would update the quantities on the specified physical measure directly. Secondly, we have a what we call available for reserve calculated measure. It is a calculated measure that is required to include the reserve modifier inside its definitions. Inventory visibility service, when executing soft reservation logics, would check this value to make sure it's not negative to understand whether the operation leads to a potential overselling. In other words, we guarantee that the available for reservation will never change to negative after soft reservation when our user specifies that we need to enforce an available for reservation check. The soft reservation reserve modifier and available for reservation measure has a many-to-one relationship. It means that each physical measure should be mapped to only one calculated measure. We should say at most one. But users have the option to configure multiple soft reserve modifiers to the same calculated measure in the case that they wish to check the changes from different data sources. They can put multiple reserve modifiers inside different data sources and make their integration to post soft reservation to their corresponding reserve modifiers indicating their data sources. But if they don't care about the breakdown information, it is okay to put the reservation coming from different sources to the same reserve modifier. In this case, the reserve modifier will be only showing an aggregated quantity, and there's no other way to check the breakdown details. With the concept introduced, let us see the configuration details inside Inventory Visibility Service. This is a screenshot from the Inventory Visibility configuration page. As usual, we first configure the data sources. We have the F&O data source indicating the default built-in configuration for Dynamic 365 supply chain management. We're not showing the details as it is enabled by default and we're not allowed to change it. Then we have the IV data source indicating Inventory Visibility Service. We have several built-in physical measures inside. And today, we will use the physical measure soft reserve as the reserve modifier. Lastly, we have the point of sale data source, and we will only use one physical measure here called sold. With the physical measure defined, we then go ahead to define a calculated measure used for available for reservation measure. We name it available to reserve, making the definition as we subtract the soft reserve quantity and actual sold quantity from the available physical quantity that is synchronized from Dynamic 365 supply chain management. On defining the physical measure and calculated measures, we can go ahead to define what we call the soft reserve mapping. Before deciding the soft reserve mapping, we need to set up what we call the soft reservation hierarchy. This is a type of inventory dimensions where we wish to include inside the soft reservation request. Then we set the soft reservation mapping. We can specify multiple records here with the left side indicating the reserve modifier and its data source, and the right side indicating the available to reserve measure and its data source. When we finalize the changes, be sure to click the Update Configuration button on the right to make the changes take effect. With the configurations ready, let's have a look at the reservation public APIs. We provide a pair of API for reservation usage. Firstly is the reserve API with a path API/environment/your environment ID and on-hand reserve. The unreserved API is just the reversed process to cancel the reserved quantities. Both of these APIs support bulk operation, where you can put multiple reserved and unreserved requests into an array and put them inside the request body. To cancel the reservation, you can either use unreserved or post a negative quantity and deactivating the available for reservation check using the soft reserve API directly. Using the soft reserve API, we can actually cover the case we introduced in previous examples. We will no longer be using POS.sold physical measure, but using IV.softReserve to indicate the process from which the order is created to the soft reserve process. User can later move the soft reserve quantity to the actual sold quantities based on their actual business logics. With the API call to reserve 50 pieces, we actually first check if the available for reserved quantity exceeds the quantities we asked, and we will pass the validation. This is what a soft reservation API request body looks like with a step on the previous page. Soft reservation request looks very much like the change events API we introduced in the previous TechTalk session, except for adding a few additional fields. For fields like request ID indicating a unique identifier for a request and organization ID for the data area ID inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management, product ID and inventory dimensions, they're exactly the same as the definitions inside on-hand change events. And we'll be focusing on the additional fields introduced in this request. Firstly is the modifier, where we specify the name of the physical measure to log the reserved quantity change. And we need to specify the quantity data source, indicating the data source for this physical measure. And lastly, we have a Boolean field called if check available for reservation. If we set the field to true, it means that we want inventory visibility to enforce the non-negative check against the available for reservation measure. Note that in this example, you actually do not need to specify the available for reservation measure, as inventory visibility service is capable of inferring the actual measure based on the reserve modifier specified using the soft reservation mapping. In some cases, our user may want to override the rule and allow oversell to a certain extent. Simply switch the available check for available for reserve to false to attain this goal. With the first API call made, we will go to the second to process the second order. Again, we'll be posting a soft reservation call with almost the same contents by changing the quantity from 50 to 60. As discussed, we don't have enough quantity to sell in this case, so the soft reservation call will fail and the second order will not take place. At this point, we actually have two types of soft reservation API call responses when we check available for reserve, but end up with different results. For success request, for example, the first request, we end up with a response with following fields. Firstly, we have what we call a soft reservation ID. It is a hashed value of inventory dimensions, inferring that when user reserves twice on the same item with the same dimension combination, we will end up with a same reservation ID. This reservation ID is used for later offset purposes. And then we have an ID specified in the request body and a processing status of success. There will be no additional message inside the success response body. However, when the request fails, we will have a failure processing status with a message. For the request that fails due to the inventory on hand for reserve is insufficient, we will have a sample message like there are 50 quantities available for reservation, which is not enough. Please note that there is no partial success status for a sub-reservation request. When there are a few pieces of inventory available for reserve, but the user requests for more, we would completely reject the operation, and there is no intermediate steps. With the API calls introduced, let us have an example to see how user can actually build their integration using the soft reservation API. Again, we will be using the sample web page that is built with Figma as the example below. The sample web page is used for illustration, but not an actual application build. The left side will be used for data illustration, hiding certain columns due to the page size. The right side will be a timeline showing the current operations. On the bottom side, currently left blank, we will show necessary comments as well as the API request and response bodies where applicable. We are beginning our day with 100 pieces of item IVS 001 available. For the first order of the day, a sales manager asks for 50 pieces inside to reserve in inventory visibility service. We can make a sub-reservation request from our sample POS system web page to inventory visibility service. Upon receiving success reservation request, we can deduct our quantities and update them on the web page correspondingly. We will end up with 50 reserved and 50 left available to reserve. At this point, the call center comes in. Being unaware of what's happening, the call center asks for 60 pieces to reserve. Not wanting to oversell, we make another soft reservation request to inventory visibility service, asking for 60 pieces. As there are only 50 pieces available, we will reject the call and respond with a fail error message. So this example illustrates the advantage of using soft reserve API against the on-hand change event API. We not only enforce a check automatically, but we avoid our users from building complex integration by themselves. So just one soft reserve API call and no more action is needed. We take a note on how soft reservation handles the reserve against different dimensions. As we know, in inventory visibility service, there is no such concept as in dynamic 365 supply chain management of the different types of inventory dimensions, such as the storage, product, and tracking dimensions. As a result, we don't assume that certain dimensions are compository when users make the orders. Subsequently, we allow our users to either leave a dimension as empty or fill it with certain values. For example, for an item IVS 001, with dimension, site warehouse, and size, user actually has two options. They can reserve either by site and warehouse and leave the size dimension empty, or with site warehouse and specifying the size dimension at the same time. Specifying the size dimension is straightforward. And let's take an example on what actually happens when we have 100 pieces of large and 100 pieces of small inside the same warehouse, but we actually reserve without specifying a size dimension. The reservation will be successful, as we will end up with 200 pieces on hand and 50 reserved. We will be left with 150 pieces available when we make an on-hand query, not grouping by size dimensions. When we group by size dimension, we end up with 3 different records. We're neither reserving the large size items nor reserving the small size items. Instead, we create a new record logging the 50 reserved being made. As the user are not specifying the size, we are not assigning a size dimension by default. So this is what happens when we reserve with empty dimensions. And users should notice that it is not advised to make mixed type of reservation. They should, for the same item, they should always specify certain dimension or always leave it as empty. So that's the process of soft reservation. The step after soft reservation with normal business logic is to consume the reserved quantity. We are converting the reserved quantities to a picked or sold item. This process is what we call offset. Consider the following example. We have a sales order selling 50 pieces from POS system. And later on, POS system syncs the order to Dynamic 365 supply chain management for bookkeeping purposes. Dynamic 365 SCM actually reserves the order inside Dynamic 365 inside and syncs the order back to inventory visibility service. At this point, inventory visibility service expected behavior is to not only deduct the available physical quantity, but to update the soft reserve quantity as well, as the deducted 50 pieces actually corresponds to the soft reserve quantities we made a few hours ago. This is what This is where offset takes action. To offset the item, we need to specify the soft reserve ID introduced previously. By specifying the soft reservation ID inside the sales order line inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management, when there is an actual risk of double booking, Dynamic 365 supply chain management will include an offset request in the same API call of updating inventory quantities, and thereby avoiding the risk of double booking. The feature is currently supported on sales order and transfer orders inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management. And there is no separate offset API for inventory visibility service. For Dynamic 365 users, they can reuse the post set on hand API call to include the offset response in a field called offset events. It is a built-in support inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management, and no further action is needed. For other data sources and external systems not using the set on hand API but use on hand change events, we advise our users to consider using unreserved API to do the offset when they build their integrations. This is the process of specifying a soft reservation ID inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management. In a sales order line where you actually wish the soft reservation offset to take place, simply go to sales order lines inventory and to the bottom of inventory service reservation ID. You will have a page on the right side where you can either specify a reservation ID or to click the right side box to indicate for a auto offset where you don't need to specify reservation IDs, but inventory visibility service will make reasonable inference based on the inventory dimensions specified on the sales order lines. Again, we'll be using the example of the first order with 50 pieces to illustrate the offset process. We have reserved 50 pieces with a success result, and we have a fake reservation ID called reservation ID 1, where will be used later. You can either choose to specify in the sales order line UI of Dynamic 365 supply chain management manually, or to put them in a field inside the data entities when you sync the order directly with all data related methods. To make use of the feature inside Dynamic 365 SEM, we need to go to the feature management workspace and enable the feature called inventory visibility integration with reservation offset to make use of the sales order and transfer order offset capabilities. We enable the feature and go to a sales order prepared. We have 50 pieces here, and go to inventory service reservation ID to type in the reservation ID that we logged previously, and click OK. The periodic syncing batch job inside Dynamic 365 SEM will be able to capture this information when we actually reserve the order inside Dynamic 365 operation SEM. In case where we skip the reservation and does the pick or packing slip or invoice directly, the batch job is capable of capturing such information as well and make sure that the quantities inside inventory visibility service is offsetted properly. And when we receive the offset event, before we receive it, we have 50 reserved and 100 available physical. An offset request will make sure that the two quantity change synchronously and the reserve tends to 0 and available physical tends to 50. To complete the data loop of inventory visibility service, your external system, and Dynamic 365 supply chain management, we are developing the new feature of soft reserve inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management, where we will support making soft reservation directly inside sales orders. The new feature will handle the offset event in the soft reserve lines automatically, and there's no need to manually specify reservation IDs if the reservation is made from Dynamic 365 supply chain management. It will be a public preview feature in the release of 10.33. Please note that the new feature is not compatible with the reservation offset feature we introduced just now. User can only enable one of the two features in feature management workspace. We suggest our users to enable the new features if there's no complex integration built with the old feature. For existing users, there will be a guidance in detail in the documentation to suggest how you can migrate the logics built on the existing feature to the new feature. So what exactly happens when we introduce the soft reservation feature inside the sales order line? Without soft reservation capability, we can create a sales order and make reservation and subsequent operations inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management. With a new feature introduced, user has a configurable option to indicate whether they require to have a soft reservation before the subsequent operations. They can choose to skip or skip with warning for soft reservation process, and this will not block the further operations inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management. But if they insist to make a soft reservation check before the following operations, Dynamic 365 supply chain management will make sure that the soft reservation is made and was successful. And it will allow users to do the subsequent operations. In cases where users have not made soft reservation, or the soft reservation was made with unsuccessful results, the operation will be blocked until the soft reservation request turns successful. So this is what the new feature looks like from a UI perspective. We can again create a sales order and go to the inventory page to go to soft reserve menu item. There will be a page showing the current reservation status, like for how many pieces of item are not yet reserved, how many are reserved successfully, and how many are reserved but failed. We have the option to either reserve or unreserve directly or to do them in batches. For the operations that is done directly, it will block the UI for a short while, and sending the request to inventory visibility service from the backend and wait for responses. Upon receiving the response, we will update the soft reservation result and then end up with the showing the quantities changed. If we again go to the details page, we will see the quantity is updated. And we can do a revert process in batch. Doing it in batch will release the UI directly while waiting the recurrent batch job every minute to update the results. Okay, so that's the soft reservation and offset feature of inventory visibility service. Due to time constraints, we are unable to go through every question and every technical details. Please feel free to read our official documentations, both for the existing feature and the coming feature when the documentation is released. And you're also welcome to have a look at the previous TechTalk sessions. And please feel free to drop us messages on Yammer, on email, or via the ideas site. Thank you all for joining today's session. And now it's time for Q&A part.
Thank you, Jiacheng. Thank you, Yufei. I think we received quite a bit of questions in the morning session. Maybe I think we can take a few questions here for our audience. One of the questions which we received in the morning session was, is there an out-of-box integration with POS system for inventory visibility service? Maybe Yufei or Jiacheng, you want to kind of provide some details on that?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Hiren. So we are about to integrate with Dynamics Commerce CSU with inventory visibility, and this is already under development. And therefore, actually, because Dynamics POS is also integrated with CSU, so that is how inventory visibility is going to indirectly integrate with Dynamics POS via the CSU integration. And in the backend, the Commerce CSU will call inventory visibilities post on-hand API to complete the scenarios or tasks such as soft reservation, hard reservation, despite it is not exactly that the soft reservation API being called that is introduced in this session, but still because Commerce would apply certain buffer control over the inventory levels when doing the query and performing those tasks. So business-wise, you shouldn't be impacted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have received a couple of questions. One of the questions which we have received is, does IB support reservation with expiry date? Yufei, you want to take that?
Yeah. At the moment, we don't support reservation with expiry dates because as currently we do not store any transactions. All we do is we take the API posts and then we process the API requests and then update the inventory snapshot and then discard whatever being posted previously. So there's no transaction storage here. Hence, we can't really track when the reservation is being posted, therefore won't be able to do the expiry date calculation. However, this is under consideration at the moment, and our next step actually is to we need to we need to communicate and engage with the customers and partners who actually raise this query and understand in more details of, for example, what kind of expiry rules they're expecting, whether these expiry rules like date and time should be applied to normally to the company level or to item group or individual item level. So once that's clarified, we would think about the next steps.
Perfect. Another question which we have received is, will soft reservation use physical reserved in on hand? Can we differentiate soft reservation and physical reservation? So I believe this question is, so we have a major physical reserved in Dynamics 365 SCM, and that measure will automatically get synced from Dynamics 365 SCM to inventory visibility service. You will not be able to do a soft reservation on any of the measures of the D365 SCM. So you will have to use a physical measure which you create against the POS or the inventory visibility data source, and you can do a soft reservation against that. And you can use this measure to probably use in your calculated measure so that you can arrive at the right available for reservation quantity, if I understand the question correctly.
Yeah, I also take the question as the same way Hiren does, with an additional comment that with a new feature of soft reservation sales order lines inside Dynamic 365 supply chain management introduced, the physical reserved quantity will only be allowed to change after the soft reservation process. So when we change the physical reserved quantity, we will automatically trigger an offset and set back the soft reserved quantities. So in other words, there will be no time when the two quantities will be changed, will be reserved at the same time. So only one of them will indicate the actual reservation taking place. There are two steps. There are the two quantities at indicating the different steps.
Okay. There is one more question. Do we need to specify location when we want to soft reserve?
It depends on the actual logic, but the short answer is no. It depends on the actual logic. When we build, we don't put any constraints on the location if the location indicates the WMS location. But for if the location indicates the warehouse, we need to do that for the time being. We have the plan of supporting no need of indicating a site and location in each and every of the API calls, not limited to self-reservation, but also in a query or in a on-hand change. But in that case, for queries, now we can specify sites and warehouse, but not specifying item ID to query all the items in the same warehouse. But in that, when we complete the switch, you can optionally choose to always specify the product ID, but not specifying the sites and warehouses. This will be quite a big change. We don't have a fixed timeline yet. But when we release the feature, we will have a comprehensive guidance on how you can do it with a configuration page to switch between the two modes of query. It is related to how you store your data inside inventory visibility service.
So Jiacheng, at this moment, like at the highest level, we will have to, when you have to reserve, you have to reserve at the site and warehouse level.
Yes,
but
exactly.
You can reserve with specific dimensions as well. Whatever dimension hierarchy you have specified in the soft reservation configuration.
Yeah. So if the question is asking for the location, not the WMS location, then you have to do that for time being. But you can expect in a few months that you no longer have to do that.
Yeah. We've received another interesting question. Will it support the inventory status? So inventory status is like one of the dimension mapping we have between D365 SCM and inventory visibility service. So when we do a soft reservation, can we reserve against an inventory status?
Yes, of course, you can reserve any inventory dimensions that is there inside the inventory visibility service. So except for the site and warehouse is compulsory for time being, the other dimensions are optional. And I also see the questions like of any WMS impact, and I'm assuming this asks for whether soft reserve supports reserve against WMS items, and yes. So when you do soft reserve, you don't need to worry about the you don't need to worry about the type of item, whether it's WMS or not. And even if you know it's WMS, you don't need to worry about the WMS related reservation inside Dynamics 365. So soft reserve is a simplified version of that, and it takes place before the actual warehouse management logics takes place. So there's no concerns on the interference of the two parts. So they happen subsequently, one by one.
The only thing I would say you will have to keep in mind when you reserve against site and warehouse or against site, warehouse, and any other dimension is that when you query for available for reservation, you will have to use the same set of dimensions. If you have reserved at a higher level, you probably have seen in one of the slides where Jiacheng was mentioning the example of site, warehouse, and size. So you want to make sure that you reserve against a specific dimension, then you query against specific dimension. You reserve against a higher level site and warehouse, then you query against that higher level, right? To get the right available on hand. So that is thing which you will have to keep in mind.
Yeah, of course, and definitely the integration should be built in a way that at least the reservation dimensions in different requests should be consistent. So you cannot jump around to say, for this reservation, I leave, let's say, inventory status empty, but for next reservation, I specify I only want the items with available status. Yeah, so that's the key takeaway on this behavior.
Okay, I think I don't see any more questions. So if that is the case, I will hand it over to Tim for closing.
Thank you, Hiren. I've posted a short survey to the Q&A panel. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be made available on the TechTalks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters today and to you, our audience, for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of the day ahead.